guys, welcome back, and this week it's all about Saturday morning cartoons, or at least some of the games that would look right at home on a Saturday morning back in the early 90s. And if you're as ancient as I am, then I'm sure you remember waking up on Saturday morning ready to watch your favorite block of cartoons on your preferred channel, because it wasn't just one channel, it was like every major network TV channel at the time all had their own block of Saturday morning cartoons. It was something I looked forward to every single weekend since I was a cartoon fiend back then, and Saturday morning was always where you got the best and newest cartoons. So I thought it might be fun to take a look at a few games based on cartoons that were worthy of that coveted spot. And hopefully these games are just as good as the cartoons. So grab your favorite new toy and a bowl of your favorite sugary cereal, and let's get things started with a true Saturday morning staple. Buster Busts Loose for the Super NES is one of those games that if you are a fan of the show, then this is exactly the game that you'd want to play. If you happen to be alive back in the early 90s, then there was just no escape from Looney Tunes. I'm not sure what caused their resurgence back then, but they were just everywhere. Clothes, Happy Meals, even movies with Bill Murray slumming it up in them.
I don't play defense.
And with that popularity brought an all-new series called Tiny Toons Adventures that followed the shenanigans of what was supposed to be the next generation of Looney Tunes characters. Hell, it even had Steven Spielberg attached to it, and you know it's gotta be a big deal if his name was on something. Or at least if he just wants to make some money off of it. Still though, the show was really popular, and we all know what happens when you got a popular cartoon in the early 90s. That's right, because Buster busted loose all over the Super Nintendo back in 1992. But one look at the back of the box and even magazine reviews for the game at the time suggested that this game is firmly aimed at very young children. So even if it did have that Konami logo, I stayed away from this one, at least initially. But let's see if all of that was wrong, and if Buster Busts Loose is worth letting Buster bust all over you. Now, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised when I tell you that Tiny Toons is a platform game, but what may surprise you is just how much fun it is. First off though, just a quick warning about that whole kids game thing, because this game has 3 difficulty settings, and if you choose the one that's labeled children, then the game's only going to let you play through a portion of each stage, skipping some of them entirely. So make sure you choose one of the other 2 difficulty levels if you want to play through the entire game. After that though, you're good to go as you take control of Buster through a variety of stages that are all supposed to represent an episode of the show. Of course, you start the game off at Acme University, where you can kind of get the hang of the gameplay, since this is actually just a little bit different than your standard platformer. Buster doesn't just jump and hop and bop on enemies' heads like you'd think, instead relying on his rabbit feet to do this sort of awkward hop kick thing. It takes a second to get used to due to how long the attack is drawn out, but you quickly learn that you're basically able to hit something the entire time that the move is animating, letting you time it so that you can take out multiple enemies at once if you do it just right. Buster's other move lets you hold down a shoulder button to have him sprint around for as long as the sprint meter at the top of the screen lasts. And this is the one thing in the game that's probably going to take the most getting used to, since it's kind of hard to tell just how Buster's going to react on anything that isn't a flat surface. And unfortunately, there are several sections where you need to be dead on accurate through multiple chained runs to make it through. If I've got one complaint with this game, it's this sprint. You eventually do get used to it, but expect a lot of deaths due to Buster just kind of doing whatever the hell he wants to at times. Once you get things down well enough though, Buster Busts Loose isn't bad at all. As mentioned, the stages are all supposed to be episodes from the show, so you get a bunch of different themed levels to make your way through, with each one having multiple areas with their own unique challenges, like hopping from train car to train car as each one falls out from underneath you, or even running from massive laser blasts from a bunch of off-brand Star Destroyers in the background. And some of them just being their own little game within a game, like the football stage where Buster's team has to make one last drive down the field to score the winning touchdown. You can either run the ball to try and make it past the other team, or toss the ball down the field to attempt to catch it and then make a run for the end zone. It's nothing hard or strategic at all, but it's a fun little break from the rest of the game's more standard platforming stages. As do the mini-games that pop up in between each stage, with some of these being full-on games in their own right. Like in Bab's minigame, where she has to make it through the school halls without getting caught so she can free her friends that are behind closed doors. Or a game of racquetball, where you have to hit the ball so many times in a row to get an extra life. There are some duds though, like the weight game here, where you just have to weigh characters against each other to see who's heavier, but overall I think these are a fun way to end each stage, and if anything, I just wish I could play them more on their own. Now, if you were waiting for me to start gushing over these graphics, well, don't worry, you finally hit the art section of the review. Konami's probably my favorite developer on the Super Nintendo, since they could always blow you away with just how good they can make a game look, even for as simple as something like Tiny Toons here. The game does look good overall, but to me the most impressive thing is just how they absolutely nailed the characters. Konami did an awesome job of just bringing the cartoon to life in this game, so there's no complaints from me, besides I just wish there was more of it, since unfortunately this isn't exactly a very long game. While Tiny Toons the cartoon was always a favorite of mine, I wasn't exactly jumping to rent this game since a lot of magazines at the time labeled it as baby's first video game, saying that seasoned gamers like me should stay away from it. But I was glad that I ended up renting this one back then because it really is a great little game. No, it's not exactly gonna challenge anyone or make you rethink what a game could be on any level, but like a couple of other games that's on this list, it doesn't need to. It's a solid little platformer that looks great and represents the show really well, and give Konami some credit because they were really good at doing that. So all in all, this ended up being one of those games that I picked up if nothing better was in at the video store, because I just knew that I was gonna have a good time with it, and I still do. So if you like the cartoon or just want a fun, breezy Super NES game that you can beat in an evening, then this is definitely a game that you can hug and squeeze into itty-bitty pieces. Power Rangers for the Super NES wasn't my thing as a kid, but that may have been my loss. I'm sure I'll be sacrificed to the gods in the comments for saying this, but I just wasn't a Power Ranger fan as a kid. But put your pitchforks away, because it wasn't because I thought it was just lame or something like that. It was mainly because I was getting out of cartoons and toys by that time. In fact, I think I was like a sophomore in high school when it finally got mega popular, and I was just far too mature to like something like Power Rangers by then, or at least so I thought. And unfortunately, that attitude carried over to video games as well, since I just kind of figured that anything coming out for Power Rangers was automatically aimed at kids still sitting back in elementary school. But I've had more than enough people tell me over the years that this is actually a decent little brawler, and one that fans of the show seem to have a lot of fond memories of. So let's see if they can do the impossible and make me enjoy a Power Rangers game. Once you start the game up, you can pick your favorite Power Ranger and then get ready to avenge the millions of people on Earth that Rita Repulsa has apparently just burned to death. You do this by punching your way through putties and a bunch of other bosses through a variety of stages all over the city. And if you've ever played a beat 'em up, then you'll be right at home here, since Power Rangers isn't breaking any new ground in any way. In fact, this is just about as simple as you can get, especially since this is one of those beat-em-ups where you're just kind of running back and forth on a single plane, making an already sparse-feeling game seem downright lonely at times, especially since there's only like 3 enemies ever on screen at a time. But one of the cooler things that the game does, in my opinion at least, is how every stage has you playing the first half as just the normal characters without their Power Ranger gear. At first I thought it was kind of weird that the game limits you to what you can do for the first half of every stage, since the human versions of the characters essentially only have one attack along with their standard combo, and if the game was just this, then things would get pretty dire really quickly. But once you get far enough into each stage, then it's morphin' time, with each character becoming much more capable fighters, having better combos that use their Power Ranger weapons, more agility to do their patented Power Ranger acrobatics from the show, and overall just more stuff that you can do with them, which is what every brawler worth your time needs. Even if the enemies are simple, and the ones in Power Rangers here are dead simple, the more ways that the game gives you to dispose of them, then the longer it can keep your attention. And the Power Ranger sections here definitely give you a decent bit of variety with how to manage and deal with the enemies. That being said though, it still feels like they could have at least tossed in a few more moves or enemy types, or hell, just more enemies on the screen at once to mix things up a bit more, since the game can still really feel slow and repetitive at times. The stages do at least offer a good deal of variety for you to toss Rita Repulsa's finest putty soldiers around in, with some even throwing in some light platforming and other obstacles for you to get through. But the overall cartoonish look of the game, along with the low number of enemies on the screen, makes them all feel a bit more sparse and simple than you might expect for a Power Rangers game. And the bosses continue that simple theme, since most of them just have very basic patterns that can be learned in a matter of seconds, with you just repeating it all through the rest of an overly long fight. Made worse by none of these bosses actually having a health bar for whatever reason. At least they all look good, and I will admit that I always loved the crazy enemy designs that the Power Rangers had. But while I can live with a bare bones basic brawler, if there's one thing that really let me down in this entire game, it's the Megazord fights. This was like the one thing that I was really excited to see in the game, and unfortunately it's just 2 stages at the very end of the game, and they are not good. Imagine the stiffest fighting game on earth, and then just toss some bad controls in on top of that, and this is what you get. Basically, all you're doing is just button mashing while building up enough of your POW meter to unleash special attacks. And the more it charges up, then the more powerful attack that you can do. But I mean, that's really about it. This actually just kind of reminds me a lot of those bad Godzilla games from back then. But yeah, this part of the game was a pretty big letdown. So overall, the Power Rangers on the Super Nintendo isn't bad. It's just very, very basic. But I can't deny that I had more fun with this game than I expected. It's not an S tier or a B tier, hell even a C tier brawler on the system, but it's still a lot of mindless fun, and I can totally get down with that. It does a great job of just being a good Power Rangers game as well, and if all you wanted was a good representation of the show on the Super NES, then this should have totally been your jam. I can only imagine how kids that actually liked the Power Rangers back then felt when they played this one. And I can honestly say that if I could have just stopped trying to act like I was way too cool to care about the Power Rangers back then, I would have probably had a pretty good time too. Definitely check this one out if you're a fan of the show or just want some mindless beat-em-up fun. Super Widget for the Super NES was a hallmark of early 90s environmental mascots, though the game doesn't quite clean up as well as the cartoon did. Widget the cartoon was one of those early 90s shows that was all about teaching us kids about the dangers of pollution. Now, I'm not entirely sure why there was such a big push for environmental friendly cartoons back then, but for whatever reason, they seem to get a lot of TV time. Stuff like this, Captain Planet, and even movies like Fern Gully seem to dominate the early 90s.
Catches on quick, doesn't it?
Widget, though, was at least successful enough to earn some video games, and I've actually covered his NES outing already on this channel. But I at least liked it enough that I thought that maybe Super Widget here would be just a better version of that game. And the back of the box definitely looks better than the NES game, so let's see if cleaning up alien planets is just as fun here as it was on the Nintendo. Widget the TV show was of course aimed squarely at younger kids at the time, so it should be no surprise that Widget on the Super Nintendo is about as basic as a game can get, with your main goal being to just jump around levels, punch some aliens with your totally disgusting stretchy arm, and then make it to the end of each section to move on. And if you're coming into this as like a hardcore gamer person expecting Widget to knock your socks off with gameplay and challenge, well, maybe just don't do that. Like I said, this is a kid's game, so I can't really knock it for being a kid's game. What I can knock it for, though, is just how Super Widget handles the one thing that could have made this game way more unique. If you've never seen the Widget cartoon, then his big gimmick is being able to change forms, since that's just what hot pink aliens back in the early 90s did. And that made for a solid gameplay mechanic on the NES version of the game, where you could actually find and then switch between his different forms to help you get past tough sections, or even to explore to find places that you couldn't access without him. The Super NES game, though, distills all of that down into more of an arcade-like experience, where Widget can only change into different forms whenever you find the power-up letting you do so. And all the forms that you can change into are tossed into different categories, like the strong form, which is supposed to make you stronger, or the legs form, which just kind of makes you into these bird and insect-like creatures. The way the game handles these categories is that each one is supposed to have their own unique abilities, like how that strong form is supposed to be able to knock down walls, or the legs form, which actually just lets you hop on top of enemies' heads. Of course, the flying form lets you fly, and the night form lets you throw out lances for whatever reason. There's actually a good variety of stuff that you can turn into, since there's a second, more powerful version of each form if you pick up the same letter for a category twice in a row. And if all of this is sounding needlessly complicated, well, you're not really wrong, especially since none of the forms really feel that much different from each other besides their unique abilities. And the ones that do have useful abilities, like being able to swim with the octopus and the crab, are literally only useful for a couple of stages. So it's super weird when you find their forms just kind of out in outer space or different levels like that, because without being able to swim, I mean, they're kind of useless. I think this game would have been much better off with less of these forms overall, but with more reasons to use them, like the NES game. The stages you're running around in do at least give you plenty of times to use those forms throughout, and they all seem to have multiple exits if you just explore a little bit. Most levels are your standard platform levels with very few surprises, though some do try to mix it up just a little bit, like this volcano level here that has you collecting water flowers before Widget burns to a crisp. Generally though, you're not going to have any problem making it through these, save for maybe some annoying platforming sections here and there, and the occasional boss that's just so easy that you just kind of actually die from sheer boredom. But overall, I'm not going to say that Super Widget is bad. It is super simple and takes all of like 40 minutes to beat without much of a challenge at all. But I think that's fine for this game. Does it really need to be any more than that for the crowd of 5-year-olds that this game was going for? Well, probably not. Personally, I think the NES game is a much better Widget game if you're just hardcore about your Widget games. But honestly, I just can't be mad at this one. I have played far worse games based on TV shows, and Super Widget doesn't even come close to those. And maybe if you got a kid that's just getting into games or something like that, then Super Widget might be a good choice for him. It's bright, colorful, easy, and gets way too overly preachy about saving the environment. Just how us kids in the early 90s liked it. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Turtles in Time for the Super NES may just be the ultimate Saturday morning cartoon game. Yes, I have covered this game a couple of times on this channel already, but I'm not sure anyone in the comments would allow me to continue this channel if I didn't include this one game in this video. Of course, I was a massive Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan back in the day. It was actually the last cartoon series that I was really into as a kid. My day revolved around making sure my ass was sitting in front of the TV as soon as the Turtles came on. It didn't matter what day it was. Pizza time! And that obviously went for video games as well, with Konami putting out its fantastic arcade version of Turtles in Time for the Super NES back in 1992. And believe it or not, I never actually saw the arcade version of this game before the Super Nintendo version came out. So this was an even bigger surprise when I just randomly saw it sitting on my video store shelf one day. But did it deliver on being a great Turtles game? Well, obviously it did, but I'm still gonna tell you about it just cause I like you. Playing Turtles in Time is just about as fun and smooth as any beat-em-up has ever been, and I think that's pretty impressive for just how simple it is. Your character only has one attack button, which you think might get boring after a stage or two, but Turtles in Time manages to keep the action moving at such a pace where it really never feels like you have downtime. Plus, you get multiple ways to engage with enemies, like running across the screen to slam into them, a quick power move by pressing the attack and jump button at the same time, and of course, tossing foot soldiers into the screen, which is actually used to take out a boss at one point. There's no multi-button moves or crazy combos here, it's just classic beat-em-up stuff, and with the way the game's laid out, it keeps up a good pace. The first part of the game takes place in your standard New York locations like city streets, the sewers, and even down into the Technodrome. But after that, it's time to get whipped through space and time itself, with levels set in places like a pirate boat, an Old West train, and even a Mode 7 hoverboard level that's all new to the Super Nintendo version of the game. So yeah, I think we all know how fun it is to play, but of course one of my favorite things about Turtles in Time is just the overall art style. While Konami's first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game was easily the best representation of the Turtles we had seen in video game form up until then, Turtles in Time is a massive step forward in just feeling like you're playing the cartoon. All of the characters have been completely redrawn in this game to look as close to the cartoon as possible, and as a fan of the show at the time, I instantly loved it. And it's not all about the looks, since it actually has an impact on the gameplay as well. Everything always feels like it's in motion due to the animation and the way the characters are drawn. So your brain really never has more than just a couple of seconds to settle on anything, because something else is always coming onto the screen. And if you want to say, well, Jeremy, every game does that. Well, no, it doesn't. Just go back and look at that Power Rangers game if you want an example. That game feels desolate and barely alive compared to this game. And that went a long way in making Turtles in Time, without a doubt, my all-time favorite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game. And it may just actually be my all-time favorite beat-em-up as well. I mean, I could nitpick the game, like how I wish it had more levels or maybe just some more enemy types, but it really would just be me nitpicking the game. And for those of you out there that's literally screaming at the screen right now about how good the newest TMNT beat-em-up, Shredder's Revenge is, well, you're not wrong. I mean, that is a fantastic Turtles game, and it deserves all the attention that it's getting. And usually that's what I'd say that you should play if you want to play a new Turtles game these days. And it may be for a lot of people, but Turtles in Time is such a special game that I don't think even Shredder's Revenge has topped it. And that is totally my hot take for this video, so please feel free to tell me how wrong I am in the comments. But I mean, really, this one, it means a lot to me. And this is one of those games where I just can't take off the nostalgia goggles or anything like that for it. And really, even if I did take all of that away, I still think that this would be one of the best beat-em-ups of all time. And maybe a little less controversial, but I also think it's the best Saturday morning cartoon game that you can play as well. And that is going to do it from me this weekend, because just like those Saturday morning cartoons back then, the fun has to end at some point. I don't know about you guys, but I always found myself switching back and forth between channels on Saturday morning, since my favorites were just scattered around channels. Like Tiny Toons was always on Fox Kids, but then the Turtles was on like CBS, I think. And you had to know the exact times that these shows came on, or you missed out until you just caught it on a rerun at some point. And that's something I don't think anyone under 30 can even comprehend. But still, I'd like to know what your favorite Saturday morning shows and channels were back then, because we all had our favorites. And if you could do me a favor and give this video a like while you're at it, I think that'd be pretty rad. Or maybe even a sub if this video made you remember just how awesome Saturday mornings were to us kids back then. But I think that's gonna do it for me this weekend, guys. Check back next week for a few more games to chat about. But until then, thanks for watching, guys.